is everything so hazy? Ah. There we go. Hi you guys, so sorry again, it's been so long since I've updated on my top 20 countdown. I wanted to have this done by the end of February, but clearly I have missed that deadline. Unfortunately, stuff has been incredibly tough to get done because I was just on my reading week about a week and a half ago, and now I've been really busy with schoolwork, so unfortunately I couldn't get a lot of videos out, so I'm going to continue this now. So let's get right back into my countdown of my top 20 favorite films of all time. Number 6. 1 Week. Originally, I had put another movie on this list because I wanted to include a documentary on my film list. Unfortunately, this is not a documentary, so there isn't any documentaries on this list, which is really weird for me because I really like documentaries, but apparently I like my fictional stories better. And 1 Week is probably the closest I would think it comes to a movie that is fictional that sounds like it could reasonably be a real story, like a based on true story. I mean, other than the fact that it is completely fictional. You know, you have a lot of movies that say that they're based on true stories, and for the most part, the people and the events themselves are true. Whereas 1 Week, it has the benefit of not being just based on basically one person's life story. It sort of has the benefit to it that it reasonably sounds like it could happen to just about anybody that would normally go through this scenario. And it's a very interesting and sort of life-affirming film. For those of you who don't know what the plot is, because I actually haven't met a lot of people that have seen this movie, and it's kind of a shame to me because it really makes me very patriotic whenever I watch this movie. It's basically a guy who is born and raised in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, who finds out that he has cancer. And it's stage 4 cancer, so it's not likely that he's going to be able to recover from it. It's a very small percentage that he can survive. And so as a result, he starts thinking about his life choices, and he starts thinking about the kind of person he's grown up to be and where he's gotten in his life. And as a result, he decides to buy a motorcycle and go on a road trip west across Canada. And it's sort of a movie that, I remember one of the reviews on the back of the DVD box, it says something like it's a love letter to Canada, and it very much is. If anybody out there who either is a Canadian and wants to see a movie that makes them feel very patriotic, or is not a Canadian and wants to kind of get an understanding of the Canadian landscape and the Canadian sort of way of life, how very much our Canadian culture is based on a regular basis, like, I feel like this movie is a very accurate portrait of what it's like to be a Canadian and what it's like to live in this extremely vast country. Like, I always keep forgetting that this country is not like most other countries where in the United States, yes, the US has a lot of, rural areas, but it also has a lot of metropolis-like cities. So you have New York, LA, Chicago, Miami, Dallas, a lot of these really big cities, whereas Canada really only has 3, and they're very spread out from each other. I mean, if you really think about it, Canada has 3 big cities. It has Toronto, which is our most populated city in the country, which I live in. There's Montreal, and then there's Vancouver. And even Vancouver has a smaller population than some other cities in the area, like in Canada. Like, I think Mississauga, which is east of me, west of Toronto, and I think it has a larger population than Vancouver does, and Vancouver is a major city in Canada. You kind of forget, living in the area that I do and what most Canadians tend to live in, because if you don't live in Toronto, Montreal, or Vancouver, you are basically living in a rural part of the country. And I do mean the greater areas of these cities, not just the downtown core. You kind of forget that this country is very much a barren landscape. There isn't much between one place and another, and so for a large part of this movie, you just sort of see this openness of our country, and you see that a lot of our country is very natural and it's very untouched, which is kind of rare to see. It's really interesting to watch a movie like that. And I mean, we are the second largest country in the world, and I have to say, as a Canadian myself, I have never been anywhere in my own home country than Ontario and Quebec. Those are the only two provinces I've been to, and I've only been to Quebec because I go to Montreal every year with my friends. Otherwise, like, I have never really traveled within my own country. I've been to the U.S. a ton of times. I've been to different states and stuff, but I've never been, west. I've never been anywhere past Ontario. I've never even been to the northern part of Ontario. It's one of those movies where the longer you sit down and you watch it and you go through the experience of wanting to go see more of your country, it just makes me want to go get a car and just start driving. Just start driving until I hit the West Coast. Also, aside from the fact that it is a patriotic movie, it is very much a Canadian love letter. It is also a life-affirming movie. It's sort of a life-affirming movie in the opposite way that Melancholia was. Melancholia was life-affirming in the most sort of depressing way possible. You look at it from more of a cynical sense and a more depressing stance. Whereas with this movie, you start off that way, and you start off with this sort of overwhelming depression, and you start off with this sort of question of, what have I done with my life? And you kind of move away from that, and the more you experience and the more you go through things, you kind of start realizing, I really should start doing more with my life rather than just living my life for other people, or living my life just because this is the way that certain circumstances have worked out and I should just accept it. It's very much that kind of film. Like, it even goes through his engagement, because he's about to get married, and he's basically questioning, should I even be marrying this girl? You sense the hesitation and the fact that he's only marrying her because he can't think of a reason not to anymore. And he even admits that to her. He admits that to her later on in the film, and he tells her, this is something I've just accepted as a part of my life that needs to happen, because that's just how he's dealt with things in life. And that's how I think a lot of people deal with life. They deal with it in a way where it's like, I can't affect anything, and so I'll just accept what happens to me, when realistically we can have an impact on the things around us and the people around us. It even has a really nice sort of subtext to it, because throughout the movie there's this sort of nice underlying narrative where every person that he interacts with, he somehow influences along the trip. Like, for instance, the very first thing that happens is he's supposed to have a doctor's appointment at the hospital, but instead he starts his road trip, and as a result, the nurse that was supposed to check on him ended up leaving work, 15-20 minutes early. As a result, the narrative is that she missed a train that would have killed her, or sorry, she got on a train early, and so she missed a train that, had she normally would have been on, would have caused her death. It's that kind of thing where it's like, we forget that we have an impact on other people's lives, and what we do and what we say, what we think, does impact other people. And it's really quite interesting, and it's really quite beautiful to think about, to think that all people are connected in this sort of weird way. It's very much just sort of one of those feel-good, life-affirming kind of movies. And the ending is also very ambiguous. I'm not going to say explicitly what happens, but like, it's sort of one of those endings where it's so open-ended that it doesn't really matter what definitively happens. It just sort of, it depends on what you've taken away from the movie. If you've taken away what I've taken away from it, it could mean pretty much anything. It could mean, again, I don't really want to give it away, but because I do want people to see this. And I wouldn't say that this is huge spoiler territory. I mean, this movie isn't really much into spoilers. I mean, half of the movie is just looking at Canadian landscapes, but I do think that it is a movie that people should experience and should kind of go through and realize, there is more to life than just the routine that we live every day. So that's my number 6, the very long-awaited number 6. Hopefully tomorrow I will come back with number 5. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you later.